Welcome, young investors. My name is James Fletcher, founder of Young Investors Society. And in this unit, we're going to dive a little more into the economic moats and what makes a great business. So last lesson, we talked about the return on equity, and we introduced the concept of economic moats, and we discussed briefly the four major economic moats. Today, we're going to dive into more detail to really understand how we identify a moat and how we identify what moat a company has. And in the end, this will help us discover the difference between a good business and a bad business. So the challenge activity that we had last time was on Kodak. So if you read the article, great. And if you didn't, click on the link now. And let's talk about what were the reasons for the demise of Kodak. What are some of the reasons that you read that you can think about that we can learn from Kodak? So take a minute, think about it now. Some of the reasons that naturally stick out to us are 1, the lack of innovation, 2, technology changed, 3, the poor culture of the business. And so for many different reasons, Kodak was not able to stand the test of time. I think when we boil it down to it, Kodak did not have an economic moat or a competitive advantage, so that when the technology changed, competition came in and they were left without a sustainable business model. Okay, so let's dive into our example today. So what is it about companies that have failed? What is it about IBM or Netscape Navigator, which I used to use when the internet started, or GM, which ended up going bankrupt and has come out of bankruptcy, or Corel, which was a word processor? What caused these businesses to fail while others around them succeeded? Did they have an economic moat? Let's start with an activity. So in handout 3.2, you can go through and identify the economic moats of the various businesses. Think about what we've learned about the moats, read the description in the handout, and then try to identify in the companies below what would be their economic moat. And if you need to, you can Google the company or find out what the company does, and we'll come back from there. All right, welcome back, young investors. I hope you enjoyed that activity. So let's go over the answers briefly. So the first one was Johnson & Johnson. So what would the moat be of Johnson & Johnson? And Johnson & Johnson sells brands like Tylenol, OTC, over-the-counter medical brands that we know well. So the first moat would be the brand. So clearly Johnson & Johnson has some brands that are very valuable, and they're able to price good prices, even though a generic Tylenol may be the same efficacy and the exact same composition as a brand name Tylenol. Johnson & Johnson is able to sell Tylenol for a much higher price. The second advantage that you could say for Johnson & Johnson is that they have a distribution moat or a low cost advantage. Just because they are in so many convenience stores and supermarkets and outlets around the world, that's a very difficult barrier for competitors to compete with. Okay, so the next one is Bank of America. What would you say is the economic moat of Bank of America, the largest commercial bank or the largest retail bank in the United States? So first and foremost, the moat for a lot of banks is high switching cost, which alludes to the pain of switching bank accounts. It's a pain to switch when you have all of your bank accounts paying online bill pay and automatic payment. It is a huge pain to switch from one bank to another, especially for your primary banking account. And so high switching costs is one of Bank of America's moat. I think the other moat you would argue is brand. Warren Buffett has owned Bank of America for a long time, and he's talked about their brand power of having a brand known for reputation, reliability, trust is important in what financial institution that you will choose. Third, Google. What would you say is Google's economic moat? I think the clear moat here is network effect. So the more users that are Googling and doing Google searches, and this could be the same for Baidu in China or Yandex in Russia, but these search engines, the more users that are using it, the more valuable that engine becomes, and it becomes a winner-take-all network effect. Next one is Samsung Electronics. What would the moat be of Samsung Electronics? Many people know Samsung for their phones and for their TVs. But some people don't know that Samsung is the largest manufacturer of semiconductors. And so Samsung is what we call vertically integrated, where they manufacture the parts that go into the device, the semiconductors, the casing, and then they manufacture the phone and the devices as well. So Samsung's primary advantage would be a low-cost advantage, would be a scale advantage. The scale in which they manufacture semiconductors is far and away greater than others, and they take this profit and reinvest in scale, which makes it very difficult for competitors to keep up. And as a result, Samsung has low-cost components, and they've also built a brand where they can sell high-end smartphones using their own internal low-cost components. The fifth one is BHP Billiton, and some of you may not be familiar with BHP, but it's a global miner of copper, of iron ore, and BHP, their sustainable advantage would be their low-cost advantage. So they have access to mines that have a very low-cost advantage, and this enables them to be profitable through the ups and downs of commodity price cycles. Okay, so I hope that was helpful, and I hope you got a few of those right. So next, let's dive into the economic moat kingdom. So let's go back in time. Let's think of ourselves as defending a castle, and let's talk about these economic moats briefly. So the first one is intangible assets. Intangible assets, or brand, is the brand that protects your business. And here we can think about very strong brands like Coca-Cola, like Nestle, brands that you trust, organizations that you've trusted for years. Maybe this brand is multi-generational. Maybe your parents helped you with this brand when you were young, like Pampers, and you wore Pampers when you were young, so you have your kids wear Pampers when they're young, and these brands become self-fulfilling in the protection that they're able to give to their business. The second moat would be high switching costs. These can be businesses like banks, which we talked about. They can also be businesses where it's just a huge pain to switch. So think about tax software or business software, where ERP software, enterprise software, is a huge pain if you want to switch from one software where it's integrated in every aspect of your business. If you wanted to then go switch to another service provider, it would be a huge disruption on your business. So you hear about when SAP is installed or Oracle is installed in a business, it takes years to install and huge disruption to the business. And that is why SAP and Oracle are able to earn exceptionally high profit margins, because it's such a pain to switch. The next moat that we talk about is the network effect. And the network effect is becoming one of the most popular and growing moats in the world. And these are dominated, the network effect basically says the more users that are on your platform, the more valuable your platform becomes. And so when you see a Facebook and more of your friends are on Facebook, the more valuable that platform becomes, or Instagram. And it creates a network effect, which is very difficult for a competitor like Snapchat to take away. Network effects can be found in the technology or the internet industry, but they also can be found in other business models, such as exchanges, global exchanges like the NASDAQ or the NYSE are examples of the more users that are on a network, the more powerful that network becomes. And look for network effects to have high sustainable moats and high returns on capital. And the last advantage in our economic kingdom is the low cost advantage. And this can manifests itself in multiple ways. It can be economies of scale, like Samsung that has this huge advantage, or BHP Billiton, which has access to unusually low-cost resources that it can sell, mining resources. Or this can be a distribution advantage, where you have so many distribution points that your cost of selling it is much lower than competitors. So this gives you an idea of some of the economic moats. These are some of the things that the smartest investors in the world look for when they're evaluating businesses. So I would encourage you to think about it right now. Think about what company you think would have a wide moat. So a wide moat business, which one would have a sustainable advantage? And a wide moat is defined for a sustainable competitive advantage for 10 years into the future. Some examples may be Coca-Cola, or Apple, or Google, or Exxon. These companies would have a wide moat. Can you think of others? Can you think of others that you are nearly confident, nearly certain that 10 years from now, these will still be outstanding, exceptional businesses? Next one is narrow moat, and these companies may have a great sustainable advantage for 2 or 3 years. These may be products that are more susceptible to current trends and current market environment. So this may be a company like Fitbit, where we're wearing devices on our wrist, or Target, which is a great business today but has risks with technology, with Amazon e-commerce, or Zynga, which is a gaming company which may have a strong visibility in gaming revenues for a year or two, but we're not sure 5 years from now because it's a hit or miss, unpredictable industry. So this would be a narrow moat. And a no moat business, and Morningstar actually says that about 50% of the companies in the world have no moat, which means they're average or below average businesses. And these could be companies like retail chains like Best Buy, which are highly competitive. And these can be found in all sectors all around the world. So really, most companies have either no moat or narrow moat. As investors, when we find a wide moat business, then we know that we've stumbled upon something exceptional. And these are businesses that we can invest in for the long run. So I hope this lesson helped go through the economic moats. I hope you have a better understanding. And I hope when you start evaluating companies, that you'll have a better idea of what economic moat the company has. This is a great time to start thinking about your stock pitch competition. So YIS has the largest high school stock pitch competition in the world, and it's run in April and May of every year. And you should be thinking about what company you would want to choose. What company has a wide moat or an economic advantage that you think is sustainable in the future. So thanks, Young Investor Society. We'll see you next lesson. All right, I hope you enjoyed the lesson on economic moats. As a professional investor, we spend a lot of time analyzing the economic moats of the business. Okay, so a couple of questions in our FAQ section. First one that we received is, how do you evaluate the direction of economic moats? So economic moats can get stronger or weaker. They can get wider or narrower over time. One of the ways that you can evaluate it is in the numbers. So oftentimes you can see companies increasing their market share, or you can see companies increasing their profit margin, their operating profit margin, or their ROE, their return on equity. So you can see it in the numbers, start to see an inflection point, and you know that that moat is strengthening or widening. So the quick answer is yes, economic moats do strengthen, and oftentimes what we've seen is economic moats tend to weaken over time. So be aware that competition is so fierce that moats tend to get narrower over time. And you know, Warren Buffett recently has talked about how the consumer branded companies, maybe that moat is more difficult because the retail channel has strengthened with Amazon and e-commerce, and the retail channel having more bargaining power, that being a branded food company, is actually more difficult in terms of their bargaining power with their retail channel. And so analyze the moat, the direction of moats of businesses is great practice for an investor. The next question we often receive is, what type of moat is the most valuable? Do you have a favorite moat, or is one the most valuable? All moats have competitive advantages, and all moats are able to protect a business. But what I will tell you that network effect is a exceptionally strong moat over the past 10 to 15 years. And so we've heard a lot about the rise of tech and the rise of internet, and I don't think it's just because of, these are great tech companies. I think that these are businesses that have created an economic moat that is very powerful. So these network effects tend to be winner-take-all businesses, which means that the profits tend to go all to one large player. So, in Google's case, they have very little competition from Bing or other search engines, which means that if a company wants to advertise on a search portal, they have to go to Google. And when they go to Google, Google has a lot of pricing power to raise the prices. And so I personally have seen the value in network effect businesses have become very powerful as moats. Network effects are more rare to find, but they're powerful long-term moats. We also don't want to overpay for them. And so you need to be careful not to just overpay for any tech company. But over time, there's different moats that do well. But I would say all moats are strong. Brand moats are very strong. High switching cost moats are very strong. Low cost moats are very strong. Network effects are very strong. But over the past 10 years, the highest performing companies and the largest companies in the world, 7 out of 10 actually are the network effect moats. So something interesting to think about. Third, does a company's economic moat change? So does their moat change over time? In the worksheet that we went through, we saw that companies have multiple competitive advantages or moats that we can describe. And so yes, they do. And sometimes the primary moat may change over time as the business changes. So one example that comes to mind is Apple. I think 10 years ago, you would say that Apple was a tech company producing consumer devices, and you bought Apple because of the brand. Today, with so many Apple devices and App Store and Apple Pay in circulation with so many users, I would say Apple has built what we call an ecosystem, and this ecosystem is a network effect. It's a form of a network effect. And so Apple's moat has probably evolved over this past decade, where the network effect, the ecosystem of Apple products, has become more and more important. And so watch for that as companies' moats may change and develop over time. So I hope this helps, and I hope you enjoyed this lesson.